Hi writers, this quick video is going to help you with WPA number 1 and what to do in each section of WPA number 1. So first of all, remember this is an explication essay. WPA number 1 is helping us brainstorm potential topics and ways of approaching this essay. So to explicate something is to explain in detail using detailed illustrations and examples. The goal of explication is to help your audience understand something that they're unfamiliar with. In this case, that something is some aspect of your identity or a behavior that you do related to your identity. We also want to keep in mind the keys to effective explication essays, a clear and focused thesis statement, which we will be working towards as we go through WP number 1, a clear sense of audience and purpose, and we're also going to work on honing that as we move through WPA number 1, and the use of compelling details and illustrations, which we will begin to brainstorm as we narrow down our topic choice in WPA number 1. So remember too, as you move through each of these process documents and all of the process work for a paper, make sure you are reviewing the assignment sheet at all steps of the writing process. This is the assignment sheet for paper number 1. And keep in mind the tips and guidelines, but also, of course, we want to keep the 2 prompts in mind. So prompt A is asking you to explain or explicate to your audience a specific aspect of your identity and what exactly you want to convey about that experience. What is it like to be this type of person? What type of thing do we tend to experience? Or what does it mean to me to be this type of person or to have this particular aspect of my identity? Prompt B is more explaining about a specific behavior that you do or have as a result of belonging to this identity group. So some of the example essays that we've read, Marquez speaking Spanish in public or Hasselstrom carrying a gun, are attempts to explain to the audience these behaviors. This is why I do it. This is related to a particular aspect of my identity, being a woman, being a native Spanish speaker. So with these 2 prompts in mind, we want to move back to the paper number 1 process doc. Remember too, previous video lessons have walked you through brainstorming different aspects of your identity. So you should already have a list of these different aspects. Keep in mind many different aspects of identity, social, a role identity, or personal identity. But we also want to consider how these aspects of our identity overlap. For example, I am a mother. I am also a teacher. But being a teacher and a mother is a particularly unique experience. So it's always good to be as unique as possible, perhaps by combining 1 or 2 aspects of your identity to consider how those 2 things overlap. We went through this brainstorming process when we first opened up WP number 1 and when we first talked about the paper topic. So if you haven't done this yet, I highly recommend it as a way to brainstorm different aspects of your identity and start to think about how they intersect with each other. In addition, you can consider these types of questions to help you think about which aspects of your identity are most worth talking about. What things do you have the most to say about, or which ones might be the most purposeful for your audience? So now on the WPA number 1 process doc, let's take a look at this. In this part 1 section, here you should just have a long list of different aspects or elements of your identity that you think might work for this paper. In the second one, I'd like for you to brainstorm for prompt B, a list of behaviors of yours that tend to be misunderstood or misinterpreted by others. So for example, I've had students write about why they tend to fidget a lot. People might be frustrated with that behavior, but they're attempting to explain it. And of course, that's going to be related to a particular aspect of their identity, perhaps ADHD or something else. So you should have a list here as well of potential behaviors that you do that people tend to misunderstood that you can link to an aspect of your identity. Moving on now, question 3 here is asking you to just narrow it down. So you have at least 15 things on the first 2 brainstorming items. Here you want to list possible topics, and this is going to be phrased just as like a phrase. So here I might say being a perfectionist teacher, Or here I might say why I carry 2 planners. So that's a behavior that I'm going to link to a different aspect of my identity. These are possible topics that I've chosen based on this whole big list I had up here because I think they might be meaningful to people. I do think people don't always understand. They make assumptions about these things, right? They might think I'm controlling. In reality, maybe, I have a little bit of anxiety about forgetting things. People might think here that, they might have their own assumptions about this, and maybe I want to clear the air. So I've chosen these because I have a lot to say about them. I have stories I can tell about these things or examples I can bring in, but also I feel like they would be meaningful to the audience. Then in this space below for number 4, I want you to return to your transitions reading about invention that listed several different brainstorming strategies. I'd like for you to choose 2 different brainstorming strategies from transitions and do them with these in mind. So you can do one for this idea and one for this idea, but they do need to be different strategies. Or maybe if you're leaning towards one or the other of the topics, you could choose 2 different brainstorming strategies and do them for the same topic. Please don't just repeat information. So for example, if you have a cluster and you have 3 ideas, please don't just put those same 3 ideas in the form of an outline. Instead, I want you to use the brainstorming to actually come up with more ideas or what you're going to say in different ways. So make sure what you come up with is unique so that you're authentically doing these strategies. Depending on the strategy you choose, you may just be able to type it here, but you may also want to, for example, create something more visual on a piece of paper. If so, just take a picture of it and insert your picture here. You can do that by going up to Insert, Image, and then from your computer or from your drive, just insert the image of the other brainstorming that you chose to do. Once you've completed that, it's time to choose. So you've done some brainstorming. That brainstorming can help you think of topics or help you think about what you have to say about different topics. And you want to choose now the topic that you feel is the most meaningful, both to you and to your potential audience. Which one will help people understand something that tends to be misunderstood the best? So you're going to just phrase it here, just like you phrased it up here. It's, again, just going to be a phrase, being a perfectionist teacher. Okay, that's all we need for the topic. Then in this box, I want you to start to brainstorm different abstract details and concrete details that you can use as examples that help people understand what this is like. Here too, you can even work towards a thesis. So you could phrase it as more of an idea instead of just a topic. So I might say feeling overwhelmed, but passionate. Maybe I know I want to sort of convey that about my experience, so I could potentially include that. That's going to help me fill in these details. You can start on either side of this chart. Maybe you want to start with abstract details. Maybe you want to start with concrete details. The abstract detail side is going to include thoughts and feelings, like I often feel stressed. I often feel overwhelmed. I often feel a sense of purpose, though. Over here, then, in concrete details, I want you to think of moments, stories, specific details that you can include. So, for example, when I think about feeling stressed, I could also say, when I have a lot to grade, I feel stressed because the work begins to pile up. Or no, it's more like what causes the stress is like wanting to do a good job. So wanting to do a good job is more like a feeling, but having a lot to grade is that concrete detail. A good explication essay is going to pair both of these and sort of bounce back and forth between the abstract and concrete. So I may also think of a concrete detail like when I think about being a perfectionist teacher, there's this story about a student who was struggling and I really wanted to help them. So this is a specific student. Maybe I had them in spring 2023, right? So I could tell the specific story. And then over here, I might think, okay, what are the abstract details related to that? What are the thoughts and feelings and ideas? Feeling like if I couldn't help them, I wasn't doing a good enough job. So in that way, you can kind of bounce back and forth between the concrete and the abstract. You just want to make sure you have plenty of both. They don't all have to have a little pair over here, but it's a good idea to think, okay, if I'm writing a whole paragraph about being stressed, do I have some specific examples to provide? If I have a paragraph about part of being a perfectionist teacher means feeling like I want to help students, is there a story or an anecdote I can tell about that? I don't have a specific number of things I'm looking for, but you should probably have like at least 6 items on here, just because a good explication paper is going to include plenty of both of these types of details. When you're done with the chart, you want to go here and think about audience and purpose. So a reminder, in the table with the 2 columns, concrete and abstract experiences and feelings. And then when we get to audience and purpose, you want to think, who am I talking to with this? Who really needs to know? Who misunderstands this thing? And then you want to think purpose. What I want people to know about this is blank. Or what I really want people to do differently is blank. Or what I really want to change about how people view this or how people treat people with this is blank. Consider and remember, in David Raymond's essay on being 17, bright and unable to read, he had that really direct address. I'm talking to parents and teachers. I want them to give me a break. I want them to give students with dyslexia a break. It doesn't have to come through that clearly in your paper, but you do want people to know. So when I think about who I want to know about what it's like to be a perfectionist teacher, I think my audience is my students who may not understand the time I put into my job, okay? And my purpose is I want them to understand and sort of like also be motivated to do a good job. Something like that, right? So you should have a clear phrase here that helps us understand your specific primary audience. Of course, a lot of people would benefit from reading about your experience, but who do you have in mind as your specific primary target audience? And then what you really want. Try to move beyond, I want them to understand. What do you want them to do with that understanding? Or what do you want that understanding to change? And this is WPA number 1. So once you finish with this, make sure to go back into Brightspace, back to that Google assignment, and actually click submit. And then I'll be able to provide some feedback about your topic before you begin the outlining process. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know.